Hello and welcome to the YYC Soccer Podcast. My name is Jason Kmet and my co-host is Scott Strasser. Hey, Scott.
Hey, Jason. How are you doing?
Pretty good night. Lots of big soccer news this week. I've actually spent a chunk of the afternoon here trying to think about how we're going to cram everything into one episode.
There is a lot going on in the Calgary soccer world this week. And we have a lot to discuss. I'm excited to delve into it.
Yeah, so we probably should get to it pretty quick. But if you haven't listened to our podcast before, Scott, could you tell us what is the YYC Soccer Podcast all about?
So the YYC Soccer Podcast, and this is actually our 74th episode, but we focus on soccer in Calgary at the amateur, collegiate, and professional levels. We talk about the teams as well as the players from Calgary's soccer community, all the way from the grassroots, youth, and amateur leagues up to the post-secondary and professional levels.
This week, we'll be talking about Cavalry FC, about their regular season finale against Valor, and also their upcoming playoff match this weekend against Forge. The Calgary Wild is going to be making some big announcements on Friday, and we're going to talk about those and speculate a little bit about first player signing and that sort of thing. There's a lot of post-secondary soccer to talk about. There are playoff matchups happening this weekend, and we'll talk about that a bit. And we have interviews, like plural interviews this week. Scott, who are our interviews with this week?
Yeah, so we have a feature interview with Tobias Warschewski, Cavalry FC striker, who recently earned the Golden Boot Award for being the CPL's top scorer this season with 12 goals in the regular season. And then I also last weekend made it out to Dinosaur Field at the University of Calgary to catch the Dinos women's team's last regular season game of the season, which was against their divisional rival, McEwen Griffins. So at the end of that match, I caught up with head coach Diogo Raposo, as well as the team's leading scorer, Grace Moore. So those were brief post-game interviews. We'll run later when we're talking about post-secondary. But yeah, the big one was with Tobias Warschewski earlier.
We'll be getting to interviews shortly in our Cavalry FC segment, which is going to start right now.
Hi, this is Tobias Warschewski. You're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
Cavalry went out to Winnipeg and beat Valor 2-1.
Yeah, I don't think this was too surprising of a result considering where Valor was at in the table in relation to Cavalry FC. But it was a 2-1 win for Cavalry, both goals from Tobias Warschewski. But it was actually a really strong start by Valor in this one. And they deservedly in the first half took the lead.
Yeah, they looked good in the first half, but it was an example of the quality of Cavalry FC and just, how they can, maybe not be the better team for a stretch of an extended stretch of a game, but then they can just kind of turn it on and get the victory. And I think, this is just another example of them doing that. And also I think there were some lapses on Valor's part as well.
There were, yeah. And what was interesting about this game is it's been pretty rare this season that Cavalry concedes first. When they did concede first, they often didn't win they didn't win those matches. But in this one, they had a much stronger second half. Tobias Warschewski equalized with a really hard shot into the roof of the net after Valor's defense failed to clear across into the box. I think it was a corner kick. And then he grabbed his second of the game and his 12th of the season quite late with a penalty kick to win it for the Cavs. So that win was enough to give Cavalry second place in the regular season, couple points behind Forge, who they'll be taking on Sunday afternoon out in Hamilton.
It was a strong way to end the season, and they are going into this match with Forge, with a really in-form hot striker in Tobias Warschewski. He's got 5 goals in 3 matches. That's right, Scott?
That's right. Yeah, he had a really strong finish to the season and a really strong start to the season too. So a lot of his goals were there was a stretch in the middle of the season where he wasn't producing, but he also went through some injury struggles with a hamstring strain in that time. I guess we can kind of let him speak for himself in that regard, though, and I think now is as good a time as any to run that interview with Tobias Warschewski. I'd like to welcome Toby Warschewski to the podcast. Toby is a striker for Cavalry FC, and he recently ended the 2024 CPL season as the league's Golden Boot Award winner with 12 goals. He previously played for FC Edmonton in 2021 and 2022, so he's no stranger to Canada for the CPL. Toby, vielen Dank for coming on the podcast this week.
Thank you, schön. Nice to meet you guys. I'm happy to be here.
Well, as I mentioned there, you recently won the Golden Boot Award with 12 goals, 5 goals in your last 3 games, so a really strong finish to the regular season. Can you describe the feeling of winning this accolade and what it means to you to be the hottest informed striker at the moment in the CPL?
We had a tough season, I would say, like with a lot of up and downs in the season. Like first half of the season was we didn't get the wins, a lot of ties. And I think the second half of the season, we got this ties into wins. And I think we as a team had main injuries during the season and everything. And I think right now everybody is back, and like you can see our attack, it's finally going to, we score more goals than before. And like, I think everybody have a lot of confidence up front. And I think we're looking forward for the playoffs for sure.
Your coach, Tommy Wilden Jr., he's praised your versatility when it comes to the goals that you've scored, all the different ways, headers, tap-ins, offside trap, long-range shots. What do you really attribute this diversity into all your different attacking skill sets? And I guess, how important is it as a striker to score in all these different ways?
Yeah, I think I would not even say that I'm a natural number 9. Like, I play a lot of different positions. Before in Edmonton, I played most of my time wide winger. Right now, I play as a second striker sometimes. During the game, I go on the left. I think I get to a point like where I have a lot of freedom in this system we play, and I think it fits me very well that I'm not a box striker where I'm only good in the box. I like to have touches on the ball during the game. I want to create things, and I think I'm able to do this in the system we play, and it fit me how we play, and in the game.
Toby, I know you've taken this question a lot the last week. You've been in the news in Calgary talking about your return to Canada after a year on the outside. So obviously you played in the CPL 2022, and then FC Edmonton folded back to Germany, and now you're back in Canada a year later. Can you talk about that gap year and if you still managed to keep fit, to keep training, and how it came to be that you were able to join Cavalry?
Yeah, I think for me was from the beginning, after Edmonton, I wanted to continue playing in North America, but like sometimes in football, also with agents and everything included, it don't go every time your way, and like I realized this really quickly after the season. I wanted to continue playing in North America, and my agents back then had a different idea of me, like going back to Europe, and I just felt not like this is the right step for myself. I just enjoy here my football, and lifestyle is for me very important, like living situation, everything. I just liked how I felt here in Canada, even in Edmonton, how things are, and decided for myself that I wanted to try it one more year, but it didn't work out. Like, there was more focusing on Europe, and like, here with the international sports, is also not the quick gun in this league. Also, like every roster was almost done international, and was a tough situation for me. I quit just the agency, and like was a tough situation overall. I could have still continued to play in Germany, but I decided like take a risk and wait to October to when the season finished here, and to get a club in North America. This was a big risk. I know, like, of course, with 1 year not playing, and but it worked out, luckily.
Prior to joining Cavalry, there are a couple of your former Edmonton teammates on the roster, Schmidt Schom and Fraser Aird. Did you talk to them in advance before joining Cavalry to get a feel for what the team was like, or just kind of curious about that relationship and how much of a factor that was in joining this team?
Yeah, of course. Chairman Fraser, I had a good relationship already in Edmonton with, and was like, of course, I talked to the guys before. Like, I knew already a little bit. I had with Tommy after my first season in Edmonton talk. Yeah, I knew what I got into, and like it's a team with high standards. It is. And like I knew everything beforehand. Like I was comfortable with everything, and like I knew I need to, I knew what to do to have success here, kind of.
Now you had so much success this year, but you also battled some injuries. Can you talk about the frustration of getting injured when you are in good form and having to come back from that? And how are you feeling fitness wise now heading into the playoffs?
I think my injury, like I put my hamstring to a time where everybody was fit. We had much more joy in attack with Musi back. Mal was Nicholas on the left. We started winning games back to back, and like we had a winning streak from 5 games, and like in a period to get injured in a time like that, and it's frustration for sure, because like most of the season we had not Musi available. Like guys up front, we needed to improvise a lot up front, like in during the season, and like to have these guys back and then got injured myself was like a tough situation to deal with. But I think I knew also it was not the main injury where I knew, okay, my season is done or anything. I knew I can be back in 4 to 5 weeks, and this was the goal, to be back and help the team again, and I was able to do it, and happy. Like also the medical stuff, everything helped me a lot, was a tough but also a good time.
So Cavalry's finished second in the table. There were so many draws early on in the season. And so the team really had to climb up. It was, I think, it's in 6th place at one point. So what do you think were the key elements for the club's success this season, especially when you have to think about how like you were pretty far down in the table early on?
Yeah, I think we knew like this season we just lost 4 games overall. The thing is, we knew we have a good base defensively. We very compact. We was the best league and defensively, and the only thing what we missed was like attacking threat, and like with guys coming back, new additions. I think we got our attack like to a point where we win games with the attack as well. Like scoring goals. And this I think changed a lot. Like key guys coming back to the team and like produced some magic. This was.
So the first match of the playoffs will be against Forge. Great rivalry for 5 years now between Cavalry and Forge. Taking them on in Hamilton, what are the challenges associated with that? Knowing that it's a big pitch, it's windy, it's artificial turf. Cavalry has had tough matches there in the past, including last year's final. So how do you feel the team feels heading east to play Forge again?
We cannot deny Forge had a very good season this year, but I'll be honest, we all confident. If we put our best out there, we confident in ourselves to get the win, and this is what we're trying to do. We go with no fear there and put our game to a show and like get the win.
Aspirations for yourself for going forward, like I believe your contract has a 2-year option on it with Cavalry. So after the season this year, I think I'm pretty sure Cavalry is going to want to activate that option. Are you looking forward to sticking around in Calgary, or what are your thoughts for future plans?
Yeah, I like it here a lot. Like from the first start, from the beginning, I got here very welcome. Was the environment, professional, everything, the city I enjoy. and I like just the environment here, and I'm looking forward after the 2 playoff games, hopefully 2 more playoff games. We will see what happened then. I cannot my option is not taken yet, I think, but I'm excited to see what's going on after this year. I like it here. This is what I can say right now.
Thanks again to Tobias Warschewski for taking the time to do the interview with us. I enjoyed some of the talk where we kind of got into some of the nitty gritty of his skill set and everything like that. I kind of liked how he started talking about some of the positional stuff. You're usually more knowledgeable in that area, but I kind of found it interesting how he doesn't consider himself a traditional number 9, for example.
Yeah, and if you think about it, I mean, he has played a couple of different positions for Cavalry this year, sometimes out of necessity due to injuries and things like that. He did play a couple of games, I recall, on the right wing. I did feel that he was best utilized as a striker, right, as a traditional number 9. And, sometimes Cavalry played with a lone target man. And then other times they fielded 2 or 3 attackers. So he really showed his versatility throughout the season. As we mentioned in the interview, he got goals off of his head. He scored some from outside the box. He had a couple kind of like tap-ins. So he really was a versatile striker, and he was kind of like Cavalry's Erling Haaland this year, if you want to compare him to a player in Europe. But I was really impressed by Warschewski, and I knew when he was signed that he was going to be an attacking threat for the team. If we go back to our episodes from March and things like that.
The task ahead of him and the rest of the team is go to Hamilton and try and get a result. So I know we were talking earlier, Scott, about having a bit of a discussion about, do we think Cavalry can win the playoffs this year? Why or why not? So I kind of like the idea. Let's do that. So we're just gonna, for argument's sake, take opposing sides here. So Scott, what direction do you want to go in here? Are they gonna, yes or no?
Yeah, I will argue that they can this year win the playoffs for the first time. So the reason that's possible is simply because they've had the league's best defense this year. And as the saying often goes, defense wins championships, right? I think Tommy Wheeldon Jr. has even quoted that in press conferences. So if you look at the league table, Cavalry has been very hard to beat all season long. Even when they haven't played well, they've managed to get results. They've only conceded 27 goals in 28 games, so that's less than 1 goal per game. And they have the most clean sheets of the league with 8. So defensively, they're very strong, very hard to beat. Best defender in the league in Dan Klomp, and one of the best goalkeepers this season in Marco Carducci. And when you look, up the pitch, they do have enough depth to get through the playoffs, even if a couple key players get hurt. They do have a lot of players kind of waiting in the wings in case they're called upon. I know it's going to be a challenge, and I don't think they're coming in as favorites, but it is possible, in my opinion, that Cavalry can win the playoffs for the first time in 2024.
I'm generally being pretty optimistic as well, but if I'm going to take the no point of view, I would say that here's some reasons that I think that Cavalry may not succeed in their playoff run. And I think the first thing right off the bat is they have a couple really strong attacking threats in Musi and Warschewski, but if they get neutralized, if they get marked really carefully and the Forge comes up with a plan, or they're just not producing, where's the creativity? Where are the goals going to come from? And that could be a real challenge. Going into Hamilton is always a really tough task. And I think that, you're going to have to win one match in Hamilton for sure, either the one this weekend or in the final, if you lose and then make it to the final again. And that's a real tough place to play. And their history of playoff success has not been there. I think that it's possible, but I could definitely see what some of the roadblocks could be. And
yeah, there's other reasons too. I mean, Cavalry has struggled to hold on to leads all season long. I can't even count the number of times where we've recapped their game and brought that up. It was really an issue throughout 2024 that they would take the lead and then immediately concede it. And yeah, offensively, I mean, they have the best or the most informed striker in the league at the moment. But if you look at Cavalry's overall offense, 39 goals in 28 games, that's like 1.2 or 1.3 per game. It's good. They're going to have to improve upon that if they want to win the championship, I think. That's the third best offense in the league, so it's by no means terrible, but they really didn't have, it seemed to me at least, the level of offensive productivity that they had, at least in 2023.
Hi, this is Grace Doherty, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
So just the other day, the Calgary Wild came out with some announcements and press releases. So they've been in the news lately in Calgary, and they announced some executive hires, and they also teased a couple more impending announcements, didn't they, Jason?
They had a couple of executive announcements. They announced Lara Murphy as their CEO and Lisa Oldridge as their Chief Financial and Operating Officer. Both of them have pretty strong backgrounds in business. I believe Lara Murphy, she co-owns the only female-run commercial construction company in Calgary. And Lisa Oldridge, she was born in Newcastle, England, but she has worked in equity capital markets, I believe, and has been on advising boards of venture capital funds. It sounds like that's a pretty extensive career in the world of finance.
Yeah, so these two will, they'll be behind the scenes, but they'll be very front and center when it comes to the rollout of Calgary Wild this season. There's another key announcement coming today when they reveal their first player. So, Jason, you and I have speculated in past episodes about who could play for the Wild in 2025. Do you want to hazard a guess as to who this player is going to be?
I think you and I both have the same opinion on this. I think it's got to be Sarah Kinsner. I think there are other people it could be, but if you had to pick one person, I think she's kind of the obvious choice.
Yeah, we compared Sarah Kinsner to the Nick Ledgerwood of when Cavalry was unveiled in 2018. He and Sergio Camargo were the first signings, and they spent a lot of that, those months leading up to the kickoff of the CPL, kind of in an ambassadorial role, really helping promote the team around the city to the media, things like that. And Sarah Kinsner, she checks a lot of boxes in terms of being a local player, being, one of those players who had to go abroad to pursue her professional career and then coming back home. So it's a great story if she is the first player. And yeah, that's definitely who we are speculating will be the signing announced Friday. She was also, of course, at the announcement of the team's founding several months back. So seems like a bit of a no-brainer, honestly.
Yeah, and the other thing is, too, is if you look at the first announcement for the Toronto club, I can't remember what her name is, but her profile in a lot of ways is very similar to Sarah Kinsner. She's 30 years old. She's, I think, the all-time leading goal scorer in League One Ontario. She briefly played in Europe, but, she's a kind of a local legend and still producing and at the top of her game. That's basically very, very reminiscent to where Sarah Kinsner's at. So yeah, I think it would be her. If it was going to be anyone else, I think that, there are two names that I think would be the other two kind of obvious names. And I think Talia White and Grace Doherty would be the other two. And I think, Scott, you and I would probably speculate that there's a pretty good likelihood that one or both of those players will end up on the Wild next year. But I think for the first announcement, it seems the smart money is on Sarah.
Yeah, definitely. And there's another announcement coming Friday, as we highlighted. A current NHL player who was born and raised in Calgary is going to be revealed as an investor, or I guess part owner in the team. And you and I over text were speculating who that could be.
I think I've kind of settled on my pick, and that's Josh Morrissey, who plays for the Winnipeg Jets. There are a few things that really match up nicely regarding timing that makes this all work.
Yeah, and you made some key connections here. So the Winnipeg Jets are in Calgary to play the Flames on Saturday. So he would be coming to the city anyway.
I actually checked, and Thursday night they're playing in Seattle, and then Saturday they're playing in Calgary. So if they're playing Thursday night in Seattle, they're probably flying in to Calgary. So Friday afternoon, I think almost certainly it's not a game day, and he'll be in Calgary.
So Josh Morrissey is the likely player, we think, but there's another player from Calgary who plays for Winnipeg who we would imagine is also in town that day, and that's Jared Anderson Dolan.
He's a younger player than Josh Morrissey, but he certainly fits the profile in the sense that he's been a very strong advocate for causes that are close to the Northern Super League's mandate. I believe he comes from a bit of a non-traditional family. He's got two moms, and he's been a very strong proponent of LBGT rights and that sort of thing. So from that perspective, it would make me think that you could imagine that this could be something that would catch his attention and maybe his interest in joining, possibly.
For sure. So we think it's going to be one of those two players. The only other name that we wanted to throw out there, because there actually aren't too many Calgarian players currently playing in the NHL. It is a pretty impressive list, but it's not that exhaustive. But from like a financial clout perspective, I think Cale Makar, who plays for Colorado, he was one that we thought, well, maybe if he likes soccer, maybe he'd want to put some of his money into a project like this.
I think that would be another good choice, but I think the timing, like Scott, you're a professional journalist, like. If you're going to hold a press conference, isn't like 3:00 on a Friday usually kind of one of the worst times to hold a press conference? Usually if somebody wants to put out a press release to kind of bury it over the weekend, that's the time they put it out there. But, the team has made a point of doing it at this time. And to me, that just seems to match up so perfectly with the Winnipeg Jets schedule.
That's a really good point, and yet another good connection to make. Yeah. And no, you're absolutely right. 3 p.m. on Friday, those press conferences are typically, because it's not something you want to be covered with too much scrutiny. Definitely hard to make print and broadcast deadlines when the announcement is at that time. But yeah, I mean, whoever it is going to be, I mean, we're excited. We're excited to see who the first player is going to be, and we're excited to see who this NHL player who's investing in the team is going to be.
Definitely.
Hi, this is Aislinn Phillips, and this is the YYC Soccer Podcast.
It's time to talk some post-secondary soccer, and we'll start with U Sports on the women's side. UFC Dinos had their final two matches last weekend. They defeated the Alberta Pandas, and then in their final match of the season, they lost to McEwen 1-0. And you were at that game. Scott, why don't you sort of give us a little bit of a rundown?
Yeah, I wanted to be at this game because, as we talked about, I think last week, this game was really setting up to be a really intriguing finale to the regular season to determine who between Calgary and McEwen would finish in first place. Now, in the end, it didn't really come to that because McEwen dropped 2 points in their game on Saturday by drawing, I want to say, Lethbridge, which meant that they were out of contention for first place. And this game was really just for bragging rights or as a warm-up game for the upcoming postseason. So I went to the game with a little sense of disappointment because of that, but it was still a pretty entertaining game overall between two divisional rivals. Still decent amount of storylines if you think about the fact that Diogo Raposo, Dino's head coach, was taking on his former team. McEwen's, one of their best players, Grace Mosala from Calgary, playing against her former coach. So it was a good game, pretty cagey. McEwen took the lead right before the half. Little bit of a mistake from Calgary's back line, but a really nice through ball from Grace Mosala, and it was finished off decently. So 1-0 lead for McEwen at the half, and then Dinos had a really good chance to tie it up shortly after the hour mark when they won a penalty kick. And actually what's interesting is just 5 minutes before that, McEwen had to sub out their starting goalkeeper. So it was a very fresh goalkeeper who came in, and the first thing she did almost was concede a penalty. But she did really well to get down low, stop the shot, even though it was going in the bottom corner, push it out for a corner kick. And, even though the Dinos pressed for the remaining 25 minutes, they weren't able to break down the Griffins' back line, and it ended 1-0.
You got a chance to do a couple interviews, and I think it's always good to sort of get the impressions of some of the key figures going into the playoffs.
Yeah, so I talked first with head coach Diogo Raposo, and then after that, I got a few comments from the team's scoring leader, Grace Moore. So we'll run those two interviews now back to back to hear what they had to say about the game.
So a 1-0 loss to cap off the season. It didn't have playoff ramifications, the result, but I can't imagine you'd be pleased with finishing the season on a losing note.
Yeah, I think we take a lot of pride in being at home and taking care of business. We had to rotate some that were on yellows and not to make any excuses, so our lineup was a little bit different. I think maybe we missed a little bit of chemistry that we normally have with our traditional maybe starting lineup or whatnot, but we're deep. We trust our players. I think maybe they had 1-2 good attempts on goal. We had lots and just couldn't put the ball away.
Yeah, there was a missed penalty, of course. I think that could have really changed the complexion of the second half, especially considering it was against a goalkeeper coming in fresh.
Yeah, obviously we trust Kaylee. Kaylee's a phenomenal player, super technical. We'll have her take another one again. Like that's part of the game. It's not that she missed the net. It was a stellar save. So we'll try to pick her up just like she's picked up the rest of the team on other times.
This was kind of your last chance to prepare for the playoffs, which are coming up. How do things change when you enter the postseason in Canada West?
We're not going to change very much. I think we've been consistent for the most part. Obviously, this is our second loss, but I think stick with our game plan, stick with what we wanted to do from preseason on and try to stay with who we are. Obviously, we'll adapt a little bit based on the opponent, and if that's UBCO or Vic, I'm not sure, but we'll stick to us and worry mostly about us.
And overall, I mean, reflecting on the season, like you said, it was a very consistent, strong showing from the Dinos, more so than last year. Right? What do you feel was the difference maker this time around? Or is it just growth and chemistry?
Yeah, I think it's growth. It's also the depth. Like we have 2 first years in Rowan and Bertini who are playing major minutes. We have second years who are helping everywhere. And there's been a lot of games on back-to-backs where we've rotated the squad because it is so hard to play on a back-to-back. And we've found success doing that because we know we're deep enough and good enough.
A player I want to talk to is Grace Moore, right? She's scored, I think, 12 goals this season. Compared to her previous seasons with the team, it was a phenomenal return. So what do you attribute her success this year to? Or is it just her taking on a leadership role in offense?
Yeah, I think the maturity helps. You understand the league. I think it's after maybe the third year of getting big minutes, you start to understand it more. You know what goalkeepers are like. You know what defenses are like. She's taking her chances. She has that freedom to go take players on and shoot and miss, and that's part of it as well. And being okay taking the next shot again. And she's done that, and she's been exceptional and scored some massive goals for us.
So, obviously not the way you want to end the regular season, but you guys still clinched first place. What was the mood like at the end of this game?
Definitely wasn't the result we wanted, but I think they scored off an unlucky mistake that we made. But we definitely dominated possession, shots. We dominated off the park. But looking forward, we still clinch first place. We're hosting a playoff game next week, and we can't wait to perform in front of our home crowd again.
You mentioned the goal they scored. That happened right before the half, which I know is a tough time to concede, right? It really changes the complexion of the halftime team talk. How do you feel the players responded to it?
Yeah, definitely at halftime we debriefed on it, and I think we responded very well. We had a few chances, but Kewen's goaltender stepped up today. Yeah, like I said, we dominated. We just have to be a little more clinical on our chances, but for sure next Friday we'll probably be hammering them in the net.
Speaking about hammering them in the net, you've had a great season, right? 12 goals, yeah. I believe. Career best for you. What do you feel you did this season to come out so hot and firing every game?
Yeah, I just feel like I had the mindset to go to net every time. I feel like all my finishes sort of differentiate, like none were the same. I really like to chip goalies. That worked out well, but my teammates were playing the perfect balls to me and they would just be the perfect finish. So I have to give credit to my teammates for giving me all these goals.
Yeah. Speaking about clinching first and having a home playoff game next weekend, really strong Dinos team this year. What do you feel made it such a tough team to beat? Like, this is a very rare defeat for you guys, second of the season.
Yeah. McEwen's always been a tough battle for us ever since I've been with this program for 5 years. But they always give us something to look forward to. We have to compete the whole time, but we were up for the challenge. Unfortunately, it just didn't go our way today, but I'm sure in the future it will definitely be a win for us.
Yeah, and I think you guys play Okanagan next week.
That should be, yeah.
Do you? I know you don't really play cross conference anymore. Do you get to get a look at how they play in the lead up? Do you get to study film maybe?
Yeah, for sure. We always do film every week. We also got a chance to play them in preseason down at UBCO. So we have a look. We've only played them a few times in my career, but yeah, we had to look at them in preseason so we know what they're capable of. But yeah, we can look at all their game footage to dial down on the right players to mark and such.
So later on today, on Friday afternoon, the Dinos will play their first playoff match, and it's going to be at home. They're playing UBC Okanagan at 4:30.
Yeah, and as Grace mentioned in our interview, the Dinos have played UBCO this year. It was just a preseason friendly, but you'd expect them to have some familiarity with that program, and I'm sure they've been reviewing the Heat's game footage in the last few days. So, it's first against fourth. It's the Dinos' first seed in the Prairie Division versus the fourth place team in the Pacific Division. So Calgary being at home, you'd expect them to be the favorites for this one.
Yeah, I think that's pretty safe to assume they'd be the favorites. One thing I'll mention about UBCO, which, I think is kind of interesting, they are loaded up with Calgary products. So there's going to be a lot of players on UBCO in front of family and friends and back home. So Annabelle Walker is from Calgary, and Ainsley Kirk is from Airdrie, Olivia Vanderwater, Calgary, Maya Letelier, who was on the all-rookie team this year, she's from Calgary, Braxton Katana, Ashley Kavanaugh, Bree Wong, who I know plays for Blizzard in the summer, Elena Georgakakos, Avery Schaefer. How many people is that? That's a fair chunk of people that have a local Calgary connection.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, that bodes really well for attendance if you think about all the UBCO fans who will be able to make a short drive to the U of C to watch their daughters play. So if you're able to make it out to the U of C on Friday evening, that should be a really fun one to watch.
Hi, this is Miguel Da Rocha, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
All right, so shifting focus to the men's Canada West teams from Calgary. They also had their final weekend of the regular season last week to set themselves up for playoffs. Both the Dinos and the Mount Royal University Cougars are going to be in the playoffs. They played the same opposition over last weekend, just on different nights. So Dinos lost to Lethbridge on Friday, but they got some redemption by beating the University of Saskatchewan on Sunday.
Yeah, and the Cougars, as you said, they played the same teams. They started off, they beat Saskatchewan first, and then on Sunday they got the victory against Lethbridge. So, and that resulted in both those teams having the exact same record at the end of the regular season.
Yeah, which seems fitting considering that these two teams were neck and neck all season long, and they drew each other both times that they played in the Coach Held Classic. So not too surprising that they have the same record, but the Dinos will get second seed and MRU will have to be third. So as a result, they're actually heading north to Edmonton to take on the University of Victoria, whereas the Dinos will play the University of the Fraser Valley in Vancouver.
The winners of those matches on Friday, they're going to stay in the same city and they'll play the winner of the other match that's happening. So, for example, the Dinos, they're going to play the winner of University of Lethbridge versus UBC, and Mount Royal would play the winner of University of Alberta against Trinity Western.
I think we have an idea of who the favorites are in those two matchups, but we'll wait and see what happens. We'll recap it all in next week's episode. So in terms of other tidbits to mention before we segue from talking about the Dinos and the Cougars, there's a three-way tie at the top of the scoring charts in Canada West. 3 players all on 8 goals, 2 of whom are from Calgary.
Yeah, Owen Antoniuk from the Dinos and Miguel Da Rocha from the Cougars are 2 of those 3 players.
Yeah, both of whom have been on our podcast. We've mentioned, Owen in particular has had a fantastic season. Miguel Da Rocha quietly had, another impressive season. He's been a stalwart for the Cougars for quite a while now. And then other players who are high up in the scoring charts from Calgary would be Gianmarco Plenzik. He was a real leader for the Dinos this season, team captain with 7 goals. And then for Trinity Western University, Charles Nana, another Calgarian who has been on our podcast. Good season for him out in Langley.
Hey, this is Mason Trafford, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
Now it's time to talk about SAIT, and both their teams are in the playoffs. And we'll start with the women's side. This past weekend, they finished off their regular season with a 4-2 victory over Medicine Hat. That's the end of the clean sheet streak, I guess. It lasted, about 6 games or something like that. So anyway, they finish first in the South with a perfect 12-0 record.
Yeah, and I have to assume that in this last game against Medicine Hat, they probably changed their lineup around a little bit or rested some usual starters. And maybe that's why it was a little closer than most of their other games have been this season. But no, as you mentioned, a perfect 12-0 record for SAIT. They're definitely the favorites to retain their ACAC championship from last year. They're going to kick off their postseason by taking on the winner of a play-in game between the Lethbridge Kodiaks and Keano on Saturday.
And if they win that match, then the gold medal match would be on Sunday.
And in terms of national rankings, SAIT is still at number 2.
And on the men's side, it was the final match of the season meant a little bit more to them because they're still jostling for playoff position, and they were able to beat Medicine Hat 5-0.
Yeah, as a result, the Trojans finish in second place in the Southern Division with 6 wins, 3 losses, and a draw. They will kick off their playoff run taking on Northwest Polytechnic on the road on Friday morning. And if they win, they will play the North Division winners, NAIT, on Saturday morning. And the winner of that will advance to the gold medal match on Sunday.
This is Kendall Showers, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
So the last segment of our episode this week, we wanted to talk about some high-achieving Calgary players who've been doing some stuff overseas. Jason, we saw on Foothills Soccer Club's Twitter account this past week that Keelan and Tegan Stewart, 2 teenage twins, I believe they're 17, but they've been tapped to play for the Welsh U19 women's team against Portugal this week as the team's final preparation for the 2024-25 UEFA Women's U19 Euro qualifying campaign.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I know that at least one of them have been invited and have attended Canadian camps. But yeah, it's kind of a cool opportunity. I'm guessing that there's some family connections there. So yeah, and from our standpoint, it'll be we've got kind of a reason to pay attention to some of those matches. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah. So of course, October 23rd already happened. I don't know what the result was, but their other game against Portugal, their second game, will be taking place Friday. We can recap next week how the Stewart twins did, if they got onto the pitch at all. But no, they were both playing for Foothills WFC this past summer, I recall. Yeah, and they've been out to Europe before, haven't they? I believe they went to Germany last year.
I think so. I'm a little vague on remembering all the details, but I do seem to remember at some point they were trialing in Germany or something to that effect.
Yeah, with SC Freiburg.
Okay.
So yeah, lots of high level opportunities for the Stewart twins, who are quite young. They're 2007 born, but already carving a career for themselves, it seems like. So another Calgarian who made some headlines overseas, I think it was about a week ago, maybe just over a week ago, but former Cavalry FC player Arabim Pepple scored the key goal in a 1-0 win for Southend United over Eastleigh in the FA Cup to put Southend through to the first round proper. And that's a big deal for non-league teams to make it that far in the competition.
I've been spending a little bit of time looking at some fan sites for Southend United, and one of the big topics of conversation about making it this far is about the money, because apparently the financial rewards for a team that size, even getting to this point, is actually significant for their budget.
Definitely, it's definitely going to give them a good boost, and they get to play a team a couple of rungs up the ladder. They've already had the draw for the next round of the FA Cup, which kicks off in early November, so just over a week from now. Southend United is going to take on Charlton Athletic, former Premier League club, who are currently playing in the 3rd division in the English Football League 1. And they're about mid-table. They're 11th place right now. So it's going to be a tough challenge for Southend, but we're hoping that Peppel sees the pitch because, he scored that key goal for Southend United, came off the bench to score it, and he's in pretty decent form this year. He's got 3 goals in 8 games.
His previous loans out the last year and a bit, they haven't really gone anywhere. I think some of it's been injury and some of it's been other factors, but he hasn't really found his groove. But it seems like maybe he's been put in a good position here at Southend United. So hopefully he can continue the goal scoring ways.
Yeah, and I would just like to flag one last thing with Peppel is he's still only 21. It's a bit hard to believe because, his 2022 season, when he was banging the goals in for Cavalry, he'd already been around for quite a while, right? Like he was even on the team in 2019, but he was only 16 back then. So yeah, 5 years later, he's still a youngin.
Thank you for listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast. You can have this podcast downloaded to your device as soon as it becomes available by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or other platforms. Check out our website at yycsoccer.com, where you can look through our episode archive and find other options to listen, including our YouTube channel. We also have links there, so you can buy Scott's book about Calgary soccer history through various online websites. You can leave us a question or comment in the Contact Us section of our website. You can also interact with us on social media such as Twitter or Instagram or Blue Sky, where our username is YYC Soccer 403. Thanks for listening.